I had a folding table and chairs and a desk in this room. I'm willing to bid on this contract. I have the wherewithal to do it because I'm the guy with the knowledge on it. And he looked around the room and he says, where are you going to build it? And he says, I'm going to build it right here. And he says, are you sure? And he says, I started a company before that you saw. I started with a table and chairs and one machine.
Welcome to the Life in Paradise podcast, the show about creating a life you never need a vacation from. You'll gain inspiration from those who have done it before as we share experiences, strategies, and offer practical steps you can take to live your dream life in paradise. With your host, attorney turned alchemist, Dawn Fleming.
Welcome to this month's episode of Taking Command with Captain Tom. And we are going to continue on our discussion about the new rich. We talked last week about the old idea of being rich really being focused on assets and money and wealth, and the idea of the new rich really being focused more around freedom. But that freedom isn't free. There's always a trade-off. There's sacrifices. So in this episode, I've asked Tom to really talk about some of his experiences with respect to career choices he's made in connection with freedom and that paycheck security. So thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. So
we were talking about different things, different phases in his life that would maybe illustrate some of the concepts that we're talking about. And the one thing that we kind of focused on was his path to entrepreneurship. And I asked him to share a little bit about when he became a full-time single dad.
Yeah.
And how that impacted his career choices.
Yeah. So let's go back a few years. I grew up in Newport Beach, California, in a very wealthy area on an island in the middle of the Newport Harbor. John Wayne lived across the street, and there's a very wealthy people around there. And so to me, it was they put their pants on one leg at a time. So I didn't get too excited about all that stuff, that wealth and everything. So when I got married in 1974, I moved up to Washington State because I was a mechanic at the time. I went through college on a physics major, but at the time I got out, my dad was a aerospace physicist, and he was getting ready to get laid off because it was a real downslope in the market at the time. So I got married, and I married a gal from Gig Harbor, Washington. And so I said, well, it's cheaper to live up there. I couldn't afford anywhere to live on my salary down in Newport Beach. So we moved up to Washington State, and I was a mechanic up there for a while. And then my uncle was a lineman at the local power company, and so got me a job as a lineman. And so I worked there for almost 9 years. I thought to myself, this is not my calling. If I worked for 30 years and that was it, and retired and everything, was that going to be enough in my life? And I said, no, it isn't enough. So I packed up and moved back down to Southern California, lived with my folks for a little while, got my feet back on the ground, and went back to being a mechanic for a while.
And after a divorce.
After a divorce, excuse me. In the meantime, I went through a divorce, and I have two sons, and they were living in Washington, and they were going to spend summers with me down there. They loved the beach and everything. So but what happened was I started doing mechanical work, working on Mercedes-Benz and high-end stuff, because I was very good at the electrical and all that stuff. My folks were lived nearby, and so my sons would come down in the summertime. So before I went to work, I could drop them off at their house, and then they'd take them to the beach and everything. After a couple of years of that, my folks wanted to travel, so I didn't have that opportunity for them to help me. So I had to make a career change because I had responsibility of two sons who were living with me in the summertime. Next thing that happened was my ex-wife wanted to go to a cosmetology school, so she says, you can have them full time. So that made a big change in my life. And so I was looking for another thing to do. Well, I had a brother was in the government video industry, and he says, "Hey, well, you want to come build some cameras for this one project?" And I quit doing mechanics and went and did that work. What had advantaged me was I set up a machine shop in my garage, because all of a sudden I had my sons full time, and I had to, be close by. I was 10 minutes up the hill in case they needed me to my business. I had the operation in the garage, and so I was there for them, and they were down on the beach in the summertime, and I'd take sandwiches and drinks down in summertime to the beach for them. And I had a friend, a gal who had 4 boys, and so she was down there with them during the day. What happened was that because of my parental responsibilities, I had to be creative about my business, what I did for work. And so it started there, and then it grew and grew and grew to where I had a couple of facilities, and my boys were older and in high school at the time, but I could still go to their soccer games and things like that, take the time off of work, because I own the business, and I had the time to do it. So I did that. It worked out pretty good. And then by the time the boys were over 18, just about that time, I had a project with the U.S. Army. I was doing government work. That went bad because of a subcontractor couldn't produce a timing signal we needed for this one camera. And so it went through bankruptcy. So I actually sold the company to one of our prime vendors, contractor. And so I became an employee. So I was okay. I didn't mind too much. I took a little bit of the heat off me. So, but I did that.
Well, and sometimes the people think, oh, you own the company, you're doing well, wealthy, and that's not always the case.
No, that's not always the case, because by the time the paychecks got distributed, I was going home and eating noodles. But that's okay. I didn't mind, because I had the freedom to control my time and what I did. And so it was
and do work you enjoy, right?
I loved the work. It was the work. I got to, in the early days of it, my dad had retired, and he was kind of one of my mentors, and I got to work with him on a lot of really interesting projects. Without his knowledge, I wouldn't have been able to do. And
we'll talk about those when we get into work that makes a difference, because you've got some amazing stories with some of the projects that you had the blessing to work on.
But so it was just one of those things where I got to have my cake and eat it too. I got to spend time with my boys, and I got to have a business that was nourishing. It was challenging at times, and sometimes I had to work very long hours, but it was okay. It wasn't painful. It was just because, the buck stops with me, and you got to do it. But it was a freedom to make my own decisions.
We'll be back in a moment.
And go on, so.
Isla Mujeres is a Caribbean jewel off the coast of Cancun. Castilito del Caribe warmly invites you to enjoy our spectacular oceanfront villa located in the heart of El Centro and a short walk to Playa Norte, which is ranked one of the top 10 beaches in the world. With an ocean view of crystal clear turquoise waters overlooking both the Caribbean and Cancun city skyline, we offer a fabulous location for you to enjoy all the peace and tranquility you're looking for on vacation, while also taking in all the excitement the island has to offer, with activities either in walking distance or a golf cart day excursion away. Please visit CastilitoCaribe.com, www.CastilitoCaribe.com. We look forward to seeing you soon.
I'm so happy to have you with me for the Life in Paradise podcast. I love our listeners and fans, and we'd love to show our appreciation for you supporting the show. So please head over to lifeinparadisepodcast.com where you can find free resources mentioned in this show and also register for our gifts, prizes, and swag. I'd also love to hear from you, so there's a place on that page to submit your questions, comments, and requests so I can serve you better. And if I answer your question on the show, we'll send you a free gift.
Yeah, and so when I met Tom back in 2000, he was
funny.
actually working really hard and essentially still running this company that used to be his.
Yeah.
But he wasn't the owner anymore. And they were doing some pretty high level work and still a lot of government contracts. And I just Orange County, California, here is, working in SoCal. And I just kind of assumed that he was making a decent income. And one day I was in his Porsche 914,
old 30-year-old.
30-year-old Porsche 914. And he had, I guess, made the mistake of leaving a paycheck stub in his car. And I looked at it and I was shocked at how little he was making, given the responsibility and the time commitment. There was no overtime. You were on a salary and, still working late and all different things. But that wasn't even the biggest part of it because his expenses were really low. I mean, you were living on your boat.
I was living on almost a 30-year-old sailboat that I had paid for.
That was paid for. The car was paid for. He in fact, when we bought our boat, it was funny. The bank said, "Well, we'll give you a loan, but we don't want him." And it wasn't that he had bad credit; he had no credit because of the bankruptcy, right? So we went to work on that and built up his credit again. And it actually became better than mine after the real estate crash. But what inevitably happened was it was the freedom. I love freedom.
Yes.
If you listen to me at all, you know that's like probably one of my mantra words is freedom, which is why I walked away from practicing law. But when Tom was working with a paycheck, and I think you had like 1 week vacation or something.
Yeah.
I mean, there was very little flexibility there because he didn't own the company anymore.
No, I was just an employee, and
So if we wanted to sail the Catalina, we're with the masses that are there on the weekends and so forth.
Yeah.
You couldn't get a slip. You leave on Friday after work, like forget it, all the mooring. Excuse me. Mooring balls were gone because everybody came over there. So it's like, no, we need to go on Thursday and have Friday off. And he couldn't do that. And so we, kind of talked about that. And he, obviously enjoyed entrepreneurship, but he just said he didn't have the confidence. I think got beat up a little bit after losing the company. Like, I don't think I'm a good engineer, but I'm not such a good business person. Of course, I was a business attorney. I said, well, don't you worry about that. I got you covered.
Yes,
and
we made a good team.
What happened was almost a little bit of a repeat of what happened when you launched Lido Engineering, in the aspect that there was a need. Somebody needed something produced, and that company couldn't produce it, and so you ended up running with it, and that's what started Lido. And then that similar situation came up with
another company. I saw a need in the marketplace for something that I knew how to do, and I wasn't happy with the company that I sold the company to. And I wanted to get kind of a little bit away from the defense industry a little bit. It was not something I was really excited about. And at the end, So anyway, there was a product that I was building it on the side. We changed the names, and I was still at that company.
Yeah, it was kind of a funny story. So it was a fan, actually. Think about like a little plastic fan you'd find in a computer.
Yeah.
It was a fan like that. But this company that manufactured they sold waterproof versions.
Yes.
And then they quit making them.
Yeah.
And so the company that Tom was working for couldn't order them from this company anymore. So Tom basically reverse engineered it,
set up
right?
a
Took
company.
it apart, took one of their fans apart, and looked at it and said, "Dawn, all they're doing is coating the inside
Yeah, so I could
of
do
these fans." And I think they were charging like over $200 or something a fan for these things, and they're like $15 fans.
Yeah.
And he says, "I think I can produce these."
Yeah.
And he said, "But I don't know how I'm gonna do it, with my company." I go, "Don't you worry about it." So I, being a business attorney, I set up Poseidon Technologies Incorporated. It was a California corporation. I incorporated it, and Tom just went to them and said, "Hey, I found this company." Literally founded this company, but I found this company.
How do you fans?
And Poseidon Technologies, and they have these fans, and they're cheaper. They're only $185 instead of $200.
Yeah.
Right. And so $15 worth of parts and some what do you call it? Coating or whatever he used. Epoxy coating that he coated the insides with to make them waterproof. I remember you had aquariums set up to test them. So they would run for, I don't know, like a week or something.
Hundreds of hours.
Hundreds and hundreds of hours to make sure that they were fully functional and just as good as the other ones. And that was really the sort of the seed money that we were able to use to put together the
startup
foundation of the company that you eventually transitioned over to once you left PVP.
Yeah. So anyway, another little funny side note. I was involved in another development of another product for the Civil Air Patrol, and the company I was working for was not interested in bidding on it. And so I called the vendor and I says, "I developed a prototype for this, and would you come meet with me and we'll discuss a contract?" And so Don had a client who had a packaging warehouse, and he had an extra room there that he wanted to sublet out. So called this vendor and says, "Hey, can you meet me?" He actually flew from Hawaii. He came to California, and I says, "Hey, can we meet over here? I want to discuss this contract." So he met me, and at the time I had a folding table and chairs and a desk in this room, and he came and he said,
and pretty much nothing else.
Nothing else. And he came in and he says, "Come on in here," and we sat down, and he says, "Okay, I'm willing to bid on this contract and everything, and I have the wherewithal to do it because I'm the guy with the knowledge on it." And he looked around the room and he says, "Where are you going to build it?" And he says, "I'm going to build it right here." And he says, "Well, are you sure?" And he says, "I started a company before that you saw. I started with a table and chairs and one machine." And he said, he gave me the contract and fulfilled the contract. I had to go buy a machine. Don helped me with that. Went and bought a machine. We got a computer and we got everything. And I delivered the contract on time with an amazing amount of mean time between failures of like 400 hours, which was unheard of at the time. And so it went on from there, and I did other projects, and so I started again from a table and chairs. I started with that in my
contract.
And a contract. Same thing. I got a contract. Yep, I can do it. And it's just that confidence that I've done it before. I can do it again. And so, it was kind of an interesting story how I built it back up, and I got more contracts. And until 2008, when everything kept getting pushed to the right, I was doing contracts for Spain, for the United States, for Colombia, all sorts of stuff. It was fun. I really enjoyed having my wife work with me, her contracts ability to write up the contracts and everything. So we worked as a team, and we did really well. And but the thing about it was we had the choice. We could go on Friday afternoon, and we'd go to the boat and be at the boat all weekend, and come back on Monday afternoon. And if sometime I says, "Honey, I got to work all weekend," fine, we'll work all weekend. But I had a certain amount of flexibility of freedom that I didn't have before. I had a lot of responsibilities. I had, like the other company, I had 10 to 15 employees that my designs were what kept them machining stuff and kept the food on their table and their families. And there was a lot of responsibility. And so it's kind of nice later that I didn't have that responsibility, that I sold the company to somebody else, and there was their responsibility to make payroll and everything. So it was a little bit, but in one thing, I got to regress a little bit. When my company was going through a bankruptcy and everything, this risk caused me to get cancer.
Well, and then there was a second divorce.
Yes.
About the same time too.
And I got cancer, so I had to start worrying about my stress. I got through it with the surgeries and stuff, but I had to worry about my own stress level in the future. So it worked out, and that was for 25 years ago. So I got through all that with some help from my wife.
Well, and it was fun. I remember, you hired my friend Laura's son, Jared, for a while, who went on to have an amazing career. I think Dusty or somebody, one of your sons, worked for you a little bit part-time, was able to pay him. So you really ran lean and mean with that company, but you were able to bring some people in when need be, when it was crunch time to get things done without having that full-time staff responsibility.
Yeah, that was a lot of pressure. That was a lot of pressure for me to make sure that we made payroll and we got the contracts and everything. But and so my life changed considerably. By the time I met Dawn, I was a little bit, she helped me out get unlost. I guess I was a little lost at the time.
Well, you had just gotten beat down by life, that's all. And so you just dust yourself off. But that's where your associations come into play. And, we talked about in the book, that you had no dreams really when I met you. And that's okay. We all go through stages of our life. And that's why it's important to really get clear about what is important to you. What do you want? What don't adopt wants that aren't yours. If you're, if you think that wealth and assets and money are going to make you happy, not necessarily. It is a matter of getting clear about what are you going to sacrifice. Yeah. And for us, freedom has been the most important thing as a couple.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for tuning in to the Life in Paradise podcast. Did you love this episode? If so, we'd love for you to follow, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We invite you to tune in every week for more inspired insights and wisdom to create your Somebody Pinch Me reality. And until next time, dream big and act on it daily.